Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission takes us into, well, the very high-stakes world of healthcare administration.
Specifically revenue protection for therapy clinics.
Exactly. We are dissecting the process of credentialing. That formal review, making sure providers are qualified.
And what happens when an insurance network, a payer as they're called, rejects an application?
For anyone out there running a physical therapy, OT, or speech-language pathology clinic, this has to be one of the most critical topics.
It absolutely is. A credentialing denial means your clinician just can't see patients under that plan. It stops everything.
It disrupts patient care and, of course, the revenue flow.
Instantly.
So our sources today are focused entirely on the credentialing denial appeal process. This is really the difference between pausing your whole practice and getting back on track quickly.
And you have to treat a denial not as just some paperwork issue, but as an urgent compliance breakdown. That urgency is everything.
So what's the first step? The absolute first thing you do?
You have to meticulously, and I mean line by line, review the denial notice. You need the exact deficiency. Is it something simple, like a form error?
Or something more serious?
Or something much more serious? Does it cite an expired license? Or, an unresolved sanction on a federal exclusion list, like the OIG or SAM databases.
Okay, let's just clarify that jargon for a second. OIG and SAM. Those are lists from the Department of Health and Human Services and the General Services Administration. If you're on them, you've been sanctioned for something like fraud. Right?
That's right. And you are barred from federal health care programs. A sanction denial is a whole different ballgame from an administrative error.
So the goal is to pinpoint the specific flaw.
And fix it immediately, before you even think about an appeal.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We need to move from that sort of general panic about getting a denial to a really targeted, actionable plan.
Exactly.
So let's dive into the top 5 reasons these applications actually get rejected. This can be the checklist you need when that denial letter lands on your desk.
And these 5 reasons, they really do account for the vast majority of denials we see across all therapy practices.
So what's the number one sort of administrative headache?
It sounds so obvious, but it's incomplete or inaccurate applications. It is shockingly common.
Really?
Oh, yeah. These forms are huge, and a simple omission, a missed signature, a wrong date of birth, forgetting a field that looks optional but isn't, that will trigger an automatic denial.
And for therapy clinics specifically.
We often see things like forgetting the precise NPI number for a service location or failing to attach the proof of malpractice coverage for the exact dollar amount the payer requires.
And the NPI, just for clarity, that's the National Provider Identifier.
Yeah.
That 10-digit number. It has to be perfect.
It has to be perfect, and it has to match the tax ID exactly. That's your EIN, the number linked to your practice.
And if it doesn't?
If the legal business name on your application doesn't match the name tied to the tax ID in the payer's database, their system basically sees it as a potential fraud. Immediate rejection.
Wow. Okay, so that mismatch is an administrative firewall. What's number 2? You mentioned licensure or certification issues.
Correct. This is about legality. Payers demand a current, active license in the exact state where you're providing services.
So what's a common mistake here?
For therapy groups near state lines, it's submitting an out-of-state license. Even if it's active, it's not valid for that specific location. Another one is just a lapse.
A lapse?
Yeah, the payer's software pulls data from the state board. If your license renewal takes, say, 5 days longer to process than your application submission, you're denied.
So it's not just that you're licensed, it's that it's active and verifiable at the exact moment they check.
Precisely. Which brings us to number 3, lack of required documentation. This goes way beyond just the license.
What kind of things are we talking about here?
Well, many practices overlook the other documents they need. Missing proof of liability insurance, the coverage limits have to be right, or required board certifications for a certain modality.
Things like CVs and continuing education docs, too. Why do payers even need a CV if the provider is already state licensed?
Because they're assessing risk beyond the state's minimum requirements. They want to see your education, your employment history. They want to confirm your specialty certifications are current.
So if you're a speech pathologist specializing in dysphagia,
they want proof. They want to see the CEU documentation or the specific certificate for that training.
Okay, that leads right into number 4, which sounds tricky. Failure to meet payer-specific criteria.
This is the strategic hurdle. A payer might require, say, a minimum of 2 years of post-grad experience for all PTs in an outpatient clinic.
So even if you have a brand new, perfectly qualified therapist.
If they don't have those 2 years, the application is rejected. It's not about competence. It's about non-compliance with the insurer's internal business rules.
And that kind of denial isn't something you can fix with a quick correction.
No, that takes time to fix.
And finally, number 5, which you touched on earlier, errors in tax or practice information.
Yes, that critical mismatch. If the clinic's legal name, tax ID, or NPI doesn't perfectly match what the insurer has on file, it gets flagged. Instant denial.
And that often happens after something like a merger, right?
Exactly. The tax structure changes, but the practice doesn't update every single payer file at the same time.
Okay, so that gives us the diagnosis. Now, the action plan. Once you find the flaw, we move to the appeal. You mentioned a structured 5-step plan.
Yes, and following this structure is what creates the paper trail you need. It formally establishes your corrective action.
So walk us through it. Step 1, understand the denial.
And that means more than just reading the first sentence. You have to go line by line and identify the specific section of their policy you supposedly violated.
So not just incomplete documentation, but...
Right. Is it failure to meet credentialing criteria, section 4.1b? Knowing that citation lets you build your defense.
That makes sense. But let me ask you this. If the mistake was really small, like you just missed a signature, why go through a formal appeal? Wouldn't it be faster to just scrap it and submit a brand new, perfect application?
That is such an important question. And, that impulse is often wrong. Strategically.
Right.
If you just resubmit a new application, you go right back to the bottom of the line. You could be adding weeks, even months to the wait. But submitting a formal appeal forces the insurer to address that specific denial reason directly and on a timeline. You're not starting over, you're protesting the original decision.
That's a huge strategic distinction. Appeal versus resubmit. Got it. So step 2 is gather and correct documents.
This is the fix. You collect everything, you update every expired license, certification, malpractice statement. You don't even start the appeal until the problem is 100% fixed.
And then step 3, draft a thorough appeal letter. What has to be in this?
It has to be concise and professional. And you have to explicitly state the corrective action you took. You say, the application was denied on this date, citing this issue. As of today, we have resolved it by doing this, see attached.
It's your evidence.
It's your evidence for any future audit proving you acted fast.
Then, step 4 is about the rules of engagement.
Submit the appeal on time. Insurers are strict. It's often 30 days from the denial date. You have to hit that deadline.
How should you send it?
Certified mail, it gives you legally admissible proof of delivery, or their online portal, but only if you get a time-stamped confirmation. And keep copies of everything.
Everything. The denial, the letter, the corrected docs.
Everything.
And the final step.
Follow up and next steps. Don't just mail it and forget it. If you don't get an acknowledgement within a week, call them. If they miss their decision timeline, you call them. Silence is not good news.
So what this all means for you, practically, is that a structured, prompt process turns a revenue crisis into a manageable problem.
Exactly. And speaking of timelines, we really need to talk about the context around that, especially with Medicare. That's where the financial risk just skyrockets.
So how long are we realistically waiting for a decision?
For commercial payers, it's usually, 30 to 60 days, but it varies a lot.
But with Medicare, it's different.
With Medicare, federal rules impose very hard deadlines. You have to submit what's called a corrective action plan, which is basically your appeal within 35 days of the denial.
35 days. That is incredibly fast, especially if you're waiting on a state board to update a license or something.
It is. And if you miss that 35-day window, you run the risk of Medicare viewing the issue as permanently unresolved. That can lead to formal exclusion.
And they have a deadline, too.
They have 65 days from the denial date to give you a final decision. Missing these deadlines moves you from a paperwork problem to a really severe long-term compliance problem.
Okay, that's a huge risk point. Now, what about authority? Who can actually sign and send this appeal? Does it have to be the individual therapist?
Generally, the provider or an authorized representative, so a practice manager, a CEO, an owner.
Yeah.
The key thing is your appeal letter has to explicitly state the signer's authority to act on the provider's behalf. If you don't, they'll just reject the appeal on a technicality.
Let's go back to the appeal letter itself. You mentioned attaching updated documentation. What level of proof do they need?
They need what's called primary source verified. This means they won't just take a photocopy of your diploma.
So what does it mean in practice?
It means the document has been checked against the original source, the state board, the medical school. Your submission has to make it clear that your documents meet this standard, or that they can easily verify them through platforms like CAQH or NPPES.
Okay, this is probably the most critical question for a clinic owner. Can my therapist keep seeing patients and just bill them directly while we wait for this appeal?
The short answer is generally no. Not if you want to avoid some serious financial and ethical problem.
Because the insurer won't pay.
The insurer will not reimburse for any services while the provider is not in-network. And billing patients directly is very complicated. Most patients rely on their in-network status.
So you're just not getting paid for that work.
It creates a massive financial gap. That's why resolving this fast is so critical. Every single day the appeal is delayed is a day of lost revenue.
That really drives home the urgency. So what if the appeal fails? You followed all 5 steps and the payer still says no. What's next?
You don't necessarily have to throw in the towel. If the problem is still administrative, you can usually correct that final error and submit a fresh application, the reapply option.
So reapplying becomes the right move only after you've exhausted the appeal and fixed everything.
Correct. But if the denial is because the payer insists you still don't meet their criteria, you might have grounds for a more formal review.
Like what?
Well, many policies allow you to request a formal hearing, or if you think the insurer just misinterpreted their own policy, you can seek guidance from your state insurance department.
This whole deep dive really has been about proactive defense. Knowing these requirements and acting fast is the only way to protect your practice.
We covered the urgency, the different kinds of rejections, the 5 big pitfalls, and the 5-step process to overturn a decision.
What's really fascinating here is that the highest value for a practice isn't just fixing this one denial. It's analyzing why it happened.
Absolutely. If your appeal fails, maybe you bring in some expert help to figure out where your compliance system failed. That prevents you from doing this all over again next year.
The error isn't the paperwork, it's the system that produced the bad paperwork.
That is the strategic win, preventing the next failure.
So as you move forward in managing your practice, here's something to think about. Considering the strict and often non-standard payer-specific criteria we talked about, how often is a credentialing denial really a failure of the application versus a failure to thoroughly research that insurer's specific requirements before you even started? The proactive research might just save you the appeal. Think about that. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.